Story 1. Growing up, my parents had a strict rule that we could not wear socks in the house after 6 in the evening. They said feet need to breathe at night. I did not question it and went barefoot all night as if it were a family ritual. Once when I had friends over, one of them was scolded for wearing socks at 7:30 in the evening. I thought, oh no, you broke the sacred foot law. Story 2. I lived with a parental dress code in high school. White socks, black shoes, pants an inch too short, which made the white socks more obvious, button-down collared shirts, and a crew cut. It made me look more like a geek than the horn-rimmed glasses did. 1966 to 1970. Story 3. No pooping in the house. Not mine. A classmate's father had this rule and he was serious about it. At any sleepover there was a zero-tolerance policy about pooping in his house. We had to hold it or go together to the nearest store to use the restroom. What is strange is this was in the Bay Area, where everyone was on the city sewer system and septic systems were not a thing. Also, his house was massive, 6 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, so it was not an issue of availability. To this day, I have no idea why he did not want kids pooping in his house. Story 4. We were not allowed to read the Berenstain Bears because the father bear was portrayed as a doofus, and it was not acceptable to portray parental figures negatively. Story 5. When I was in high school, my dad would take my car keys if my grades slipped. In his view, anything under a B+. That in itself was not too crazy, except that if I wanted them back before the next report cards came out, I could earn them back by donating blood. I was never able to get him to explain the reasoning behind it. It felt like a strange blood sacrifice ritual to summon car keys back from the Shadowlands. Story 6. Don't sleep with the fan on. You will die. Apparently there was an urban legend in Korea about someone who died in their sleep because of a fan. Story 7. We were not allowed to watch anything that involved witchcraft or magic. We would watch The Little Mermaid, and my mom would fast forward through the part where Ariel sells her soul and gives up her voice. The Lion King had the scene where Rafiki summons Mufasa's spirit. Snow White had the crone making the poisoned apple. Could not watch or read Harry Potter until I was well into my teens, and only after a serious conversation with my parents explaining that none of it was real and that I should read it with a discerning eye to avoid tarnishing my soul. Anyway, I am very into fantasy books and television shows now, so it had the opposite of the intended effect. Story 8. Halter tops are for hookers. So I foolishly asked how many hookers they knew. It did not end well. Story 9. At my mom's house, anything with teasing was not allowed. The 2 biggest offenders of that were Dennis the Menace and Dumbo. At my dad's house, the word sucks was treated like a swear and would get you sent to the stairs. Although he did own a copy of Dumbo that we could watch. Story 10. I met a girl who said she was not allowed to watch or read Harry Potter as a child. I asked if her family was religious and she said no. Her dad just did not think it was realistic. I asked if her parents were strict but intellectual like they believed only in science. She replied no. Her parents were not big on scientific things such as going to the doctor or getting vaccines. They had banned Harry Potter but not for religious reasons. They did not believe in God or in science. So what did they believe? Story 11. I could not play with Lego bricks, watch television, or use the computer right after lunch. I think my mom took the no swimming after eating idea and applied it to everything. Story 12. If you go into the kitchen to cook something for yourself, you have to offer to cook for everyone in the family as well. Could not be simple food. It had to be a balanced meal. I would fast until someone else gave in and cooked, laughing out loud. This made me grow up hating cooking. It still makes me irrationally angry. Story 13. Not being allowed to ask why about anything because it leads to arguments. Story 14. We were not allowed to scrape peanut butter, mayonnaise, jelly, or similar spreads from a butter knife back into its container. They called it the devil's share, and you had to waste whatever was left on the knife because if you did not, the devil would be angry. My family was very strange about it, and I never once saw the devil lick it clean, so I am not sure why he would make a fuss over it. Story 15. I wasn't allowed to paint my toenails black because of Satan. They were dark blue for years because that was as close as I could get to black. Story 16. One of my parents' rules was that I could only ask for about 3 cigarettes a day. Dysfunctional family, laughing out loud. Story 17. I could only have sex with my girlfriend if the door was open. The rule said the door could not be closed when she was in the room with me, so I changed it. Story 18. No pierced ears before 16. At 16, I was grown enough to decide whether I wanted pierced ears. We could not say holy cow because cows are not holy. We were not from a Hindu background, so we said perforated cow, meaning a cow full of holes. Story 19. We had to stand in the doorway of our bedrooms waiting for inspection before we were allowed out on Saturdays. Even if you needed to use the bathroom across the hall, you had to stand with your legs crossed until mom thought your room was clean and tidy. I hated when my brother was inspected. First, because he always had something to pick up and put away, and it took forever. You could not just push things under the bed or into the closet. Those places were inspected too. It made me compulsively neat and organized, and it took a long time to stop feeling I had to do everything before Saturday. Story 20. I was kicked out once because I left soapy water in the drain after cleaning the entire house. Story 21. My mother barely ever let me have sugar. She would only let me drink skim milk and tap water. One day I walked to the store and bought some Gatorade with my own money. She flipped out. I was about 16 years old at the time. Story 22. My mom, rest in heaven, forbade us from sleeping with our hair wet because we would wake up blind. My friend's mother would not let him keep his pet turtle because, according to her, turtles made you dumb. Story 23. In my teenage years, I had to wear clothes many sizes larger than I actually was to hide my figure. Pants were sizes 8 to 12 and shirts were size large. When I moved away from home and gained independence, I realized I was a size 4 in pants and a size small in tops. It was not slutty or revealing to wear clothes that fit properly. Story 24. Anytime I stayed over at a certain friend's house, we couldn't drink anything until we ate all of our food. Not even water. It was odd. Story 25. No elbows on the table. What was more insane than the rule itself was how it was enforced. People who put their elbows on the table had their elbows poked with a fork. Story 26. Do not take a bath during a thunderstorm. You could be electrocuted. Story 27. My car had a curfew, but I did not. I could stay out all night doing whatever. But God forbid that a $500 Celica was out past midnight. Story 28. We had to take our shoes off before getting into our dad's car. He would even brush our shoes and feet to remove any accumulated dirt. He did not want to get the inside of his car dirty. We could not put our shoes back on until we were out of the car. One night he was driving home and saw a man in a wheelchair pushing himself backward along the side of the road. It was raining, so Dad decided to offer him a ride. This was in the late 1980s and early 1990s. He helped the man into the car, got him situated, and drove him to his destination. Dad noticed the passenger seat was much wetter than it should have been considering it was not raining that hard. It turned out the man had urinated in his pants and it soaked into the seat. That rule went out the window that night. I was laughing out loud. Story 29. I was forced to throw away a book about evolution and another about mythological creatures because they went against God. I later searched for both as an adult so I could own them out of spite. Story 30. Not really that insane, but we were not allowed to have toy guns. Once, when my brother climbed a tree he was not supposed to, I shot him out of it with his own pellet gun. He could not tell Mom. Story 31. We weren't allowed to have any lights on after 9 p.m. No lamps, no television, nothing. I thought it was normal until I realized most people simply live in their homes at night. Story 32. If you yell or cry in my house, at least in my case, my parents would remove the light bulb and lock me in my room from the outside. Story 33. Once a month I had to urinate into a bag. My mother said it was to test my health, but I later learned she was a long-time drug user and had used my samples to pass drug tests. Story 34. You have to drink 2 glasses of milk if you want to drink other than water or juice. 3 glasses if you want cordial. I hate milk now. Story 35. I wasn't allowed to wear black 2 days in a row because I might be perceived as gothic. Story 36. I was not allowed to walk down the street to the convenience store with a friend who happened to be a boy after school because it made people think I was a streetwalker, also known as a sex worker. I was also shamed as promiscuous at 3 for normal exploratory behavior with a peer, along with many other things over the years. I am almost 48 and still have personal issues regarding modesty and sexuality because of it, despite therapy. My mother is dead, and I am not sad about it. Story 37. We were not allowed to swear or to use substitutions for swears, since the intent was the same. Golly, gosh, gee, shoot, darn, b-word, frick, and so on were all punishable by a spoonful of cayenne. Story 38. I was not allowed to cut my hair. This was my father's rule. When I was about 13, I told my grandma I had the money and asked if she would take me to Great Clips. She did. Imagine my father's surprise when I walked in with a very short pixie cut. He did not speak to me for over a month. Now I have 2 beautiful little girls. My 7-year-old is obsessed with Korean pop Demon Hunters and asked if she could dye her hair purple. Guess who is rocking purple hair? My beautiful girl. Story 39. I wasn't allowed to watch Grange Hill, Biker Grove, or EastEnders because the actors didn't speak properly. Story 40. I wasn't allowed to watch anything that wasn't Christian, so I only watched VeggieTales and Left Behind. Story 41. It was not a rule, but it happened every day, which I later realized was insane. My father used to buy each of us at least 1 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola every day from when I was about 13. We would stroll around drinking it all day, bring it to the dinner table, and have it while doing homework. This continued until I was about 20. I have probably consumed well over 2,500 2-liter bottles of Coca-Cola in my life. It was like trying to hydrate with sugary soda. For some reason, there were no concerns about our health. Both of us became diabetic, and my father passed away long ago. I wish that habit had never been normalized in our home. In the last decade, I have probably consumed less than 10 liters of Coca-Cola. Story 42. As a child, I wasn't allowed to wear black. It was considered a grown-up color. I could only wear white or beige underwear. No other colors because they were fast. Now my entire wardrobe is black, and I have a huge collection of lace and trapdoor panties. Story 43. We were not allowed to watch Code Lyoko or Pokemon because they had fighting, yet Harry Potter and Spider-Man were not only allowed but heavily encouraged. Story 44. I will share the rule and then explain why it was strange. I was allowed to watch most movies, whether R-rated or not, if I had a clear reason to want to see them and they were not considered realistic. For example, Silence of the Lambs was not allowed. Alien was considered fine. I also started reading Stephen King when I was 11, and that was fine. But my mother always had the news on in the kitchen, and we often helped her. As a result, I have direct memories of 3 Los Angeles riots news broadcasts, the O.J. Simpson trial coverage, Jeffrey Dahmer being murdered in prison. That led me to ask my mother what a serial killer was, and she gave a very gentle answer when I was 7. I also remember the JonBenet Ramsey murder. I will never get the images from those broadcasts out of my head. I think her logic was that the world is awful enough as it is and she wanted me to be aware of it, but she did not think I needed to see fictionalized versions of it. Story 45. Treat all these random, traumatized children who are appearing and disappearing without notice, without explanation, and without input from my brother and me, as full siblings with no conflict. We will handle violent outbursts, embarrassing behavior at school, loud outbursts late on school nights, inappropriate sexual behavior, and any extra security needed for everyone's safety with alarms, motion sensors, and cameras. Story 46. As an adult living in my parents' house, I had to get permission from my mother to download an app on my phone. She had parental controls that would not allow me to install any app without her code. That was one of the many weird, controlling things she did during my adult years. She then cried and wondered why I wanted to move out and live on my own. Story 47. We didn't have cable, and Mom policed what we could watch. No Harry Potter, but The Last Unicorn was okay. We joke about it now. Mom is cool and dad can watch sports again. Story 48. I was never allowed in my parents' bedroom. Only twice did we have a movie night there. Felt special, like being in the Forbidden Forest. The other side of my family did not allow Harry Potter because they believed it was witchcraft. Story 49. My mother's most insane rule was that we could have ice cream but couldn't get the sugar cones. It had to be the cake cups, which tasted like nothing, or a bowl. I never could figure out why sugar was acceptable in the form of ice cream but not in a mildly sweetened cone. She also only allowed us to drink 7-Up if we got sodas. Apparently sugar was okay if the soda was clear. Story 50. We were never allowed to wash our hair directly with the shower head. The water had to go into a bucket first, and then we poured it over our heads. My mom was convinced it would prevent hair loss in the future, but it did not. Story 51. I was raised going to concerts and bars as early as I can remember. I was born in 1988, so there was always a fog of smoke inside the bars. My late mother took me to concerts and let me watch horror movies. I saw all the 1980s and early 1990s horror films before the age of 10. My mother never allowed friends to sleep over. More specifically, I could not have friends over. My brother and sister had friends over all the time, but I was not allowed to. I find that extremely strange. Story 52. Not so much a rule, but my mom kept our house freezing cold. I remember walking around in sweatshirts and sweatpants in summer, and bundling up in a blanket and a heavy coat in winter. I will never forget that a few days before Christmas I heard my mom sneak out of bed to turn the air conditioning on. It was in the low 50s that night, and I heard it humming in the middle of the night. Story 53. Under no circumstances could I lie down after eating. Supposedly my great-grandfather died from choking on a peach pit. Why would anyone eat the pit, and how is that connected? Story 54. I was raised by a single mother who, I think, was just too tired and busy to give me rules, especially after raising my sibling, who was several years older, by herself. Not as a small child, but from middle school onward I could go where I wanted, with whom I wanted, and for as long as I wanted, as long as I did not ask for money. I let her know if I planned to be gone overnight, but that was more a suggested courtesy, and I did not get in trouble for skipping it occasionally. Her one hard and fast rule was that I was not allowed to watch South Park. I could and did literally watch whatever else I wanted, but South Park was not allowed. I followed that rule because I assumed it must be important. To this day, at nearly 40, I have never seen an episode of South Park. Story 55. We had 20 minutes to eat a meal and could not talk during dinner. Story 56. I was not allowed to watch The Simpsons, but when my grandfather was over, he was allowed to watch it at full volume. Story 57. I was never allowed outside without shoes. The only exception was swimming pools. My mother had been struck by lightning twice as a child and was terrified that if we did not wear shoes we would be struck or step on a nail. We did step on a nail. Story 58. This is not a rule but a way of thinking. Do not invest too much in friendships, even though I deeply crave them. No outsider is ever going to tell you the truth or truly help you. Only your blood family will, even if what they say or do is very hurtful. If they do, it is because they care about you becoming a better person. The reason your friends will not tell you these terrible things is because they do not care like your family does. It has been hard to feel truly valuable while growing up, or to trust friends to tell me when things are off. I have been hypervigilant around new people for as long as I can remember. Story 59. I had a mate from the United Kingdom in the 1980s who was not allowed to return to his house for any reason during the day, even to use the toilet. If he did, he would be forced to stay inside all day. So if we were hanging out and he needed the toilet, he had to go into some bushes and wipe his arse on a dock leaf. For goodness sake. Story 60. My dad did not allow us to listen to, sing, or even mention Achy Breaky Heart by Billy Ray Cyrus. It was a strict rule and he would get stern if we mentioned it. We learned to be somewhat afraid of the song, and I still feel a compulsive urge to avoid it. It turned out my dad was just messing with us and had made the rule because he thought it was funny. Story 61. Nobody was allowed to go to the toilet at night. We all had buckets with lids in our bedrooms. Story 62. My sister and I had cats growing up. Our cats were absolutely not allowed in our rooms unless we asked and were given permission. Getting to sleep with our doors open so the kitties could come in and jump up with us was treated like a rare treat, a special occasion. Now at 31, I still get a little thrill when I am at someone's house and they have their bedroom open and their pet is resting on the bed. Story 63. We often had a fruit yogurt pot for dessert. I always wanted to stir it before eating, but I was not allowed. I realized it was unreasonable and it made me cry. Story 64. No Harry Potter books were allowed on the property because they were believed to invite evil spirits. I was surprised I survived childhood with a mother like that. You would not believe how many demons are out there. Story 65. No ponytails for the morning church service because they are too casual. The evening service and Wednesday nights were fine, though. Story 66. I was not allowed to say I was bored. This always struck me as normal because my dad did not want me to be ungrateful and he wanted me to recognize my privilege. But when I spoke with my former roommates, they pointed out that it is kind of strange and unhealthy not to be allowed to express normal, age-appropriate emotions. Story 67. No drinking during mealtimes, and no leaving the table for any reason until you were finished eating. Both rules were enforced until I moved out at 17. I might have accepted them for a small child, but they were completely ridiculous. Story 68. I was not allowed cable television of any kind. I was allowed 5 video home system tapes for 10 years. 2 of them were the same movie. Story 69. We had to write permission slips and leave them on the kitchen counter with details of what we would be doing if we wanted to go to a friend's house, who would pick us up, and how we would get home. Both parents had to sign them. Our parents had conflicting work schedules and sometimes barely saw us or each other. While it seemed weird then, looking back it was pretty clever. Story 70. Superstitions. Do not place hats or anything black on the bed. It is believed to mean death. Story 71. The whole thread here is pretty crazy. I was not allowed to watch restricted movies until I turned 17. I managed to watch a few at friends' houses, but my mom would have been furious if she found out. At home, I was only allowed to watch parental guidance-suggested films with a parent or my grandmother. When I was alone or at someone else's house, I could only watch movies rated for general audiences. Unbelievable. Story 72. You were allowed only 2 slices of cucumber from the communal salad bowl at dinner. No more. There was no cucumber scarcity. My mother simply insisted that everyone have an equal share. Only the cucumber was rationed. Nothing else. Story 73. The entire house had to be cleaned, including dusting, vacuuming, scrubbing, and so on, by 5 p.m. on Friday. If it was not finished, we were not allowed to do anything for the week except previously committed obligations that other people relied on. For example, if I did not want to go to my soccer game, I could not avoid the cleaning because my teammates relied on us. Story 74. Do not drink while eating. Finish your plate first. Then you may have 1 glass of lemonade. Her reason was that you would fill up on fluids and not have room for food. Story 75. No gravy in the bedroom. The living room, office, bathroom, or even the roof are fine. Just don't get caught. Story 76. Growing up, fart was a bad word, and we were only allowed to say fluff. When someone said it around us, my brother and I would look at each other and giggle. Story 77. My brother and I shared a car in high school, and for some reason my mom, who never drove or even entered the car after we got our licenses, wouldn't let me put an air freshener in it. She would look in the windows, and if she saw an air freshener, she would take it out. It made no sense to me then and still doesn't. Story 78. No flushing at night unless it was an emergency because I could not wake my dad. I had to tiptoe upstairs because I could not wake him. I still go upstairs very quietly to this day. If my dad was napping during the day, the television had to be on low. If it got loud and woke him, I would be scolded or made to feel guilty. Friends could not ring the doorbell in case he was napping. The dogs could not go outside when he was sleeping because they might bark. It was not until I had a severe migraine in college and my roommates continued talking while I tried to nap that I realized this was not normal. Story 79. If I wanted to play outside, I had to be back when the streetlights came on. That was reasonable, except in the middle of winter when the lights came on at 4:30 in the afternoon. I would get out of school, go home, change, do a little homework, step outside, and then practically have to step right back in. Maybe not super insane, but it was very frustrating. Laughing out loud. Story 80. You cannot go to 7-Eleven because only miscreants hang out there. Story 81. I needed to have my hair tied at all times or I would shed too much. I also had to tie it either in my room or in the bathroom. I had long hair as a child and my stepmother was difficult. Story 82. Nothing dramatic, but when I was a kid before mobile phones, if I called home from a payphone or a friend's house and my father answered, he would not engage in the call until I had said the family password. He would hang up if I said anything other than the password when he asked for it. It is quite funny now that I think back on it. Story 83. I wasn't allowed to watch Kenan and Kel because it would make me stupid. I was, however, allowed to watch Ren and Stimpy. Story 84. No clogs until the 5th grade. Only hussies would want to wear them. Story 85. Could not watch Married with Children even as a teenager, but could watch South Park and rated R horror movies as young as 8. Story 86. I was forced to bathe with my friends, mostly girls, until I was 10. When I refused, it started a big argument. The next time she tried to make me shower with a neighbor, I resisted and she gave up. I am in the United States. This was around 1998 and there was no real reason for it. Story 87. I was not allowed to shower before my stepfather in the morning, even if it made me late for school. My shower time was limited to 5 minutes. If I went over, he would turn the light off and lock the door from the outside, knowing I had a severe fear of the dark. He worked from home without a set schedule. Although we had a decent hot water tank, he would purposely crank up the heat and run the water before his shower so there was no hot water left for me. Story 88. We weren't allowed to say the word lie at my grandmother's house when I was younger. If we wanted to accuse someone of lying, we had to say that they were fibbing or telling stories. As we got older, they quietly stopped enforcing this rule for some reason. Story 89. No Teletubbies when I was an infant because the characters did not use full words. No Simpsons. Nothing with witches, wizards, or magic in general, although Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie were allowed. No clothing or merchandise with a skull on it. I even had pajamas returned to the store because there was a small skull on the tag. The words sucks and damn were treated as swear words. Having a religious mother sucks. Story 90. I was not allowed to eat until my parents said I could, and only what they permitted. I would go to sleep hungry most days. When I could not take it anymore, I would go to the kitchen in the middle of the night and eat anything I could that they would not notice. A spoonful of peanut butter, regular butter, a slice of bread, or a couple of saltine crackers. Story 91. When I was between 0 and 11 years old, if an air conditioner or ceiling fan blew near me, I had to wear a tea towel or kerchief over my head to avoid a stiff neck or an earache. I rebelled and stopped when I started middle school. Story 92. We were not allowed to have anything to drink with our meals. We had to wait until we finished eating. Looking back, it was strange and somewhat dangerous. Story 93. We are not allowed to use a nail clipper in the evening because someone in the family will die. Story 94. They said that if we find money lying around, we can keep it. Maybe it was designed to prevent us from leaving money behind. But if your family ends up stealing from one another, it is a strange way to move out into the world, especially when you have roommates. Story 95. They had a cast iron bell they rang when it was time for us to come home. These were the days when children were outside unsupervised for hours. Story 96. I was only allowed to watch SpongeBob if my mom was in another room because she thought it was annoying. Story 97. My mama never wanted anyone with a baby to have a cat because she said it would suck the baby's breath out. She probably scared a lot of mothers back in the day. I also wasn't allowed to watch scary movies because my parents said I could become possessed through the television. Story 98. My mom had a rule that my sister and I could not fly on the same plane together. We always had to fly offset. My dad would fly with me and my mom with my sister. One of our biggest arguments happened when we were in our early 20s and went on a trip together on the same plane. There were no rules about riding in the same car, even though that is far more dangerous. Story 99. No touching or kissing until I wed. Side note, I got married at 32. No, I did not wait. Story 100. I had to wipe along the grain of the laminated wood tabletop. Story 101. Growing up in the 60s in Washington, D.C., we were not allowed to flip off police officers. Story 102. If it's yellow, let it mellow was the motto, but they did not sufficiently explain that I still needed to flush at other people's houses. My grandmother had to teach me that, laughing out loud. Story 103. When my friends and I went to a restaurant with my mother and she did not want to pay for their meals, she said when the check came that we should split it equally. This was in junior high. They expected my mother to pay and looked at me as if I had 7 heads. Everyone heard about it the next day at school. Story 104. Could not wear watches because time is a social construct. Yes, we were late to everything. Story 105. This is not my story but a childhood friend's. Because our parents were friends, we were often made to hang out together. His household had a rule that he was not allowed to touch the copy of Catan until he was 18. His mother said the game was too mature, although his 8-year-old sister could play as much as she wanted. Story 106. Not me, but I had a very religious friend who, even as an older teenager, had to have their father check whether a movie was suitable to watch. Story 107. I don't know about insane, but when I got a smartphone, my foster parents had software on it that allowed them to remotely control our phones and turn apps on and off. We had to turn them in at night and were not allowed to have any search engines. They also checked our phones to make sure we were behaving. When we wanted an app or a song, we had to get their approval and they would enter a password to install it. I don't think this is insane, just abnormal. Story 108. Dating was not allowed. I could not go out with a girl and could only attend group gatherings. I guess I saved a lot of money that way. Story 109. My mother still will not allow anyone to open an umbrella inside her house or to enter with an umbrella open. Story 110. When the microwave was not in use, we kept a mug of water in it. Story 111. Nobody was allowed to use the upstairs bathroom for 7 years because once my mother plugged something into an outlet there and it sparked. We had to either go into my parents' bedroom or go downstairs to use the bathroom. You could go in there to open a window or look through the cabinets, but the shower, toilet, and sink were off limits. Story 112. My mom never let us have friends over even for a few hours. Examples that helped my siblings and me realize how abnormal this was. My older brother sneaking friends over for a sleepover was labeled by our mother as rebellion. B. My mom gave my housemate the cold shoulder when I invited them home for Christmas. Story 113. My dad would not let my siblings and me own a deck of cards. I think it was because he associated them with gambling. Every time I won a cute, fun-sized deck at Chuck E. Cheese, he confiscated it and stowed it with the other decks he had taken. I just wanted to play Go Fish. I still feel weird as a 30-year-old pulling out a deck of cards in front of him. Story 114. Do not fall asleep on a bar couch in the middle of the night. That would reflect badly on my mother. Why would she still be in a bar if her children were so tired? Being in a bar with 2 children late at night on a school night is bad enough. At home, do not fall asleep when she is drunk and wants to tell her story and needs help getting up from the floor. That would be rude. Do not interrupt her sleep all afternoon, and on better days do not complain about being tired when she wants to go swimming, sunbathing, or to the pool bar at 11 in the morning. Why complain about doing something fun? Other children love the pool. Also, do not expect to bring your Nintendo dual screen and sit wrapped in a towel watching the screen because the sun makes it hard to see. You are supposed to get a tan in summer. Do not complain when she wants to go to the regular bar after the pool closes at 7 in the evening. You had your fun at the pool and now she deserves hers. We could play our Nintendo dual screen there, though. It kept us quiet. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.